Hello, fellow fantasy sports fans. Welcome to MFSN. I didn't even get our name right. MFSN The Hub's Fantasy Baseball Strategy Show every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. I'm here as always with Kasey, Vlad to the Bone, Shienvold, and Ross the Boss.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ross the Boss, and I want to talk fantasy baseball, especially second base and third base with you today. I'm excited for baseball season, guys. It's going to be great. We have no games yet, but we actually have the players are in camp. People are getting ready.
I think the games start tomorrow.
Yeah,
I mean,
there you
look,
go.
Kasey and I, this is about our favorite time of the year. It's getting into spring training. Baseball drafts are coming up.
Second weekend of March.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Second weekend of March.
And it's Kasey's birthday tomorrow, but I don't think that's
it
part of his
is?
excitement.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But
Thanks for letting me
birthday,
know,
Kasey.
Dan.
Well, I'm telling you now. I told you in advance.
I'm an old man.
You can't blow it.
24 hours. I got. Okay, I'll get something ready.
So, Ross, you're right on the money. We're prepping for the drafts, and we're just going through our positions. Last week, we did catchers and first base. This week, we're going to do second base and third base. We think both are actually kind of shallow positions. It's weird. I'm looking at all the positions. They all feel shallow in a strange sort of way. I guess it's just, the need you have.
I disagree. I did. Second base has great. The top 10. If
Second
you have a
base
10-person league,
I thought second base was shallow. It's actually
not
deeper.
shallow.
It's deeper than first base.
In some ways, yeah.
In some ways,
you can find more value lower, but there's still big gaps between like number 4 and number 5, and then number 7 and number 8. You get big gaps there. That would be where the tiers are separating, I guess, if you're doing a tier system.
It's true, but when we looked at first base, I think we all had like a top 3 or 4, and then there was a precipitous.
Yeah, but again, you can draft Christian Walker in the 12th round in your league, and Christian Walker is going to have 30 home runs and 100 RBIs.
We'll
I know he doesn't have the batting average, Kasey Shienvold. I know that.
We'll continue this debate, and I want people who are watching to join in here. Tell us what you think. Which are the shallow positions? So let's dive in here. Ross was about to leave screen. I was going to start with him, but I'll start with Kasey. That's okay. If you have to get up and leave, just let us know.
No, not leave. No, I'm good.
Let's go with what is the first tier. Let's just talk about who is in this first tier and we'll start with second base. Kasey,
second base. Okay, I think
tier.
Go ahead. I think there are 4 people there are 4 in the first tier if you're counting Mookie Betts as a second baseman, because Mookie Betts played enough last year in LA that he qualifies at second baseman. That immediately puts him into that first tier of second baseman. But generally, I don't consider him a second baseman, but he qualifies, so it counts. So for me, it's him, it's Jose Altuve, it's Marcus Semien, and it's Ozzie Albies if he's healthy, right? I think Jazz Chisholm, an argument can be made for him, but the team just announced he's going to be playing center field this year, so he won't qualify at second after this year. So again, it becomes a position issue, but he qualifies this year. Those would be the 4.5 players I would put in that first tier.
Okay. Also, if you're in a keeper league and you're looking at Jazz Chisholm and thinking he's going to lose second base eligibility, in Yahoo leagues, you only need 5 games to keep that. So it is very possible he'll keep it anyway.
And by the way, outfield is pretty darn shallow too. So having him as an outfielder doesn't hurt either if he can deliver on his 20-30 or 30-30 potential.
Okay, Ross, how about you? Who's in the top tier for you? What number of players are in this top tier?
Well, I mean, I think the subject people always forget is what categories are in your league. So I'm just naming the 5 basic ones: runs, RBIs, home runs, batting average. Is
stolen
usually
bases.
in the
stolen bases.
Yeah, stolen bases are all the top 5 categories. And people have crazy leagues where they do slugging percentage and on base percentage, and they're crazy. But I'm just saying the 5. So you got to remember the 5 basic categories and how these players affect those categories. So I think Marcus Semien, is the number 1 second baseman overall. I mean, we're not. Are we saying Mookie Betts at second base still, or we're not saying Mookie Betts?
I mean, I'm including him.
He qualifies there for this year. If you're in a redraft league, you only need him to qualify there for the year.
I'll put Mookie Betts 1 or 2. Marcus Semien 1 or 2. Marcus Semien will get you stolen bases. He hits home runs. He gets RBIs, and he scores runs. So there you go. I mean, so those 2, 1, 2. I hate saying Mookie Betts is a second baseman, but I'll say it. Jose Altuve is number 3. I like him a lot, like Kasey said. That potent Houston lineup is just got better. He's going to have a huge year with runs scored, even RBIs. He's going to have a huge year. And the question mark in this whole second base is this guy, Ozzy Albies. I mean, he was injured last year. He didn't play much. He had a monster year the year before. We all thought he was the second coming, and then he got hurt. So I don't know. Is he going to bounce back, Kasey? I don't know. Is he going to have a big
he's
year?
Young
like he
and
did?
the track record's there.
Yeah, I mean, he has that great lineup in Atlanta. Atlanta has a great lineup, top 5 in the National League, very strong. So Ozzy's a big question mark. And then another guy that has great stats but gets no press, and I'll just say him, is Brandon Drury of the Los Angeles Angels. I mean, this guy hits home runs, scores runs, RBIs. He's an offensive machine, and he did it with Cincinnati. And then he was traded middle of the year to somebody, and Reds got rid of the whole team.
I think it was the Angels, wasn't it?
I don't think so. The Angels signed him as a free agent, but long story, I think it was San Diego he went to, and it was San Diego.
You're right.
And but I mean, there's a lot of good second basemen. Mac, there's a lot of great second basemen, and there'll be some busts. There'll be some guys that are great value picks we'll talk about. But I mean, for me, I think second base, there's 10 good second basemen that I wouldn't mind having in my team.
I agree with you that there's a lot of good second basemen, but you can't say great, right?
Right. The great Mookie Betts and Marcus are my top
what
2.
we're talking about when we say shallow. Like, how many first 4-round talents are there at a position, right? Because if you're thinking a 12-team league, 48 picks in the first 4 rounds, if only 2 of them are going to be first baseman, to me, that's a shallower position. And that's the way I think of it. Not that I agree with you. There's value to be had in the later rounds, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But after the top 3 or 4, if you count Mookie Betts, I don't think anybody goes in the first 5 or 6 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think if you don't have Mookie Betts in here, it's very possible that none of these players are going to go in the first four rounds, at least, maybe even 5, because there's some question marks to them. And you talked about Ozzy Albies. He's a guy who could be absolutely at the top of second base. He could also finish he's going to finish top 12 in all likelihood.
He could also play 75 games.
Well, he could certainly do that. But given that he only had one major injury, I don't think of him as having a track record of this. We don't know what it is.
Right.
So I have Mookie Betts. He's almost in a tier by himself if you include him as a second baseman.
I agree, but it's just, I hate saying he's a second baseman.
All right.
But
So for the sake of argument, let's remove him. We'll move him to outfield. We don't want Ross to.
It's just like he does play it, and I forgot it's 5 games or 6 games last year.
Okay, but let me ask you this, Ross. Just in all seriousness, if you draft Mookie Betts, are you seriously not going to play him at second base a lot of the time? Because I think it's going to be easier to find an outfielder. I know you're saying outfield is shallow.
Depends who you have, right?
I don't know. That's a great question, Dan. But let me tell you something. The outfield position in a 10 or 12 person league, let's say, it gets shallow after. I mean, I've done 2 drafts so far this year in baseball, just getting warmed up for our league, and after like the 12th and 13th round, it gets kind of, the Jock Petersons come up. You get the third. You get these guys that you're worried about playing time. I mean, that's
right.
The main
I think
thing.
there are maybe 8 to 10 elite outfielders, which is a lot more than there are.
That's a big statement. 10 elite outfielders in Major League Baseball right now.
For fantasy purposes, yeah. But the problem is in a standard league or most leagues, you need 3 of them, right? And so that's the equivalent of 2 or 3 at every other position where you only need 1 of them.
You got to divide it by 3 every time with outfield. Right. So if you've got 8 or 9, you really have 3, essentially. Okay, so, I mean, Ross said Marcus Semien at the top. I think you had Jose Altuve next.
I
Kasey,
still think,
right?
because he gives you the batting average also. He doesn't run as much anymore, but he still is going to get 15 bags. And his batting average, his runs scored, his home runs, his RBIs tend to always be as good, if not better, than Semien's. So,
it's weird, though, because I'm a fairly risk-averse player in certain ways, not with trades. I love trades. But when I'm drafting, I'm off, especially in the early rounds, I'm looking for players that are not going to bust. But Ozzie Albies is very hard to pass up there just because of the.
Who would you rather have, Ozzy or Jazz?
I'd rather have Ozzie.
I would rather have Ozzy only because, as Dan said earlier, they were both injured last year.
Yep.
But Chisholm seems to have back and leg issues with no track record of sustained health. Ozzie Albies has 2 years of playing really healthy until he got a freak injury on like a Lisfranc injury, a foot injury during an at bat, which wasn't like a soft tissue or like a muscle injury. I just think he's healthier. And to me, that's safer. Jazz Chisholm to me is more exciting, probably has a higher ceiling because of the power that he.
Oh, I don't think he's got a higher ceiling than Albies. I think his ceiling might be similar. These are the things you can debate, but I have Albies second to Mookie Betts. If we remove Mookie Betts, I actually have him at the top.
Well, you probably will get him in.
You should probably keep him in your league. Then.
Yeah, in our keeper league where I already have him. Now, Jose Altuve is interesting because he's an older player. He had a bounce back year, and clearly he's a pretty elite guy. He should be at the top. Marcus Semien, Case, what do you think about him? Ross had him at the very top.
I have him at number 2. I have him at 2, and I have Albies at 3. Not because I don't think Albies is as good as those two, but again, he's young. He hasn't proven it as much as those two have. And Semien, while he was a batting average liability, I think, but that was only in the month of like April and May last year. From June on, or from the end of June until the end of the year, he was similar to the player he was in Toronto the year before. And he was always good in Oakland. His defense is what kind of held him back from being considered one of the better players.
Okay, so
I'm actually wearing my Oakland shirt today.
Oh yes, and Ross has been fed a lot. He has like half of his wardrobe is Oakland A's.
So it's funny. I was looking at the Oakland A's roster, just 2023 Oakland A's roster. Just curious to see who's left on the team, guys.
Let's see. Ramon Laureano, is he still there?
That's one. Can you name the catcher? No. Can you name? I mean, that whole team. It reminds me of the movie Major League. It's like all these guys are just floating around and just never really had a home, and they come to Oakland. It's kind of sad for the fans in Oakland, but oh well.
They'll find a way to win again. They always do, but not this year.
I don't know about that. I don't know about this year, guys.
Not this
year. I don't know. I mean,
so wait, guys, I have Jazz Chisholm 5th.
So
where do you have him?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sure you have your Cleveland Guardian second baseman up there. Where do you have your Cleveland guy?
Andres Jimenez.
Let's see if you can guess where I have him.
I have him 6.
3.
7.
I have him at 9.
9. I have at number 4.
Because the Guardians lineup just isn't that potent.
If we're not talking Mookie Betts, at number 4, I have Tommy Edman. I think this guy
that's a great one. I think he's 5 for me.
He stole 32 bags, last year, and he's in that St. Louis lineup, which he's going to score a crap ton of runs. He gets on base at a good clip. He's not going to be a power guy, 10 to 12 home runs probably, maybe.
No,
15.
but Kasey, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I said categories. So stolen bases counts just as much as home runs. I mean, it does.
Tommy Edman was 4th in stolen bases across the leagues. I mean, Randy Rose.
32 is going to do that. But having 32 stolen bases is a big plus, and if you can get those guys who steal bases on your team, it's a big advantage.
And if you can get 32 steals out of a guy who helps you in other categories as well, like let's take who was it, Billy Hamilton of your Cincinnati fame. Like the guy was the fastest man on the field every time and could steal you 70 bags, but it came with a
220 batting
average, a Mendoza line batting
RBI.
average, no power, no RBIs, and your runs scored are the same as your stolen bases because you scored only when you got on base.
Well, let me also say Ross was making I think a really good point that stolen bases count as much as home runs. But if we take it even further, stolen bases are also much harder to find than home runs.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So pounce on a guy like that. I think Tommy Edman is.
I mean,
really
they
underrated.
did make the bases bigger this year, guys, and there is like a certain amount of times a pitcher can throw to first base now to make it easier to steal bases. But even with all that, players are still not going to steal as many bases they did.
You know who I like, guys? I like Whit Merrifield to have a really nice bounce back year.
Does he qualify at second?
He does.
He does.
In Yahoo leagues, which you know.
So he could be your value pick. Is that correct?
He is not my value pick. I tried to
Okay,
pick a
let's
value
talk
pick
about
that
value
isn't even
picks.
in my top 10. Go ahead. Tell me a value pick.
Well, it's obvious who I'm going to say, right? Rookie of
Yep.
the year, got hurt last year.
Oh,
He has the best hair in the Major League Baseball.
I have him as a
Jonathan,
sleeper.
I have him as a value
sleeper.
pick, I think.
value pick, Kasey Shienvold,
Go
just
ahead, announce
because
it.
Jonathan India, to me, is going to have a bounce back year. He plays in that easy ballpark where the home runs are easy to hit, and he'll play every day. And I think he'll have a bounce back year, and he'll have 20 plus home runs, and he could be a 20-20 guy. Actually, he actually could steal 20 bases.
He
I mean,
absolutely
he
could.
was
And people
hit bad.
forget.
I mean,
People forget last year he was injured. Like it
The whole
wasn't.
year.
He played the whole year injured, and that's like the guy came up through the system as a high prospect. Spring training said, I plan on winning Rookie of the Year his first year in the bigs, wins Rookie of the Year and delivers. So this is a guy who has proven that he can handle the game, right? And he got hurt last year, and now people have like forgotten about him.
yeah, I mean, I
And-
felt a little bit weird calling him a value pick, but I had him there too.
I
Russ,
mean, he's
because-
not going to be drafted that
I
high.
had
this
him
year.
ninth. I had him in ninth in my rankings of top 10 too.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to be drafted in the first 10 rounds.
So I
He's
didn't even
not.
have him ranked in my top 10, and yet I still have him as a value pick. I think it's a
Wow.
great
So-
back-end pick.
Another value pick. The Atlanta Braves loves this guy, and he got a lot of playing time
Yep,
last year.
I have him as a
don't know-
value pick
Love him.
too.
And I don't know how they're going to. They'll figure it out because of the DH and everything. But Vaughn Grissom, I mean, this guy is the real deal. I mean, he has unbelievable potential.
I have him as my 10th second baseman.
Yeah.
He made the top 10 for me.
He was
mean,
11. He was just outside for me, but I have
mean-
him also as a value pick.
He's my value. He's in my another value pick. So I gave you my 2 value picks. I want to hear you guys.
Well, Jonathan India was my value pick, but I'll give you my sleeper.
Let's hear it.
Ross, I know you're not big on rookies, but Miguel Vargas, who doesn't yet qualify at second base, but
I
sounds
have
like
him
he's
as a
gonna be-
value pick.
It's so sleeper and value are a little bit hard to say. You know, I like to say sleeper is a guy who's kind of coming out of nowhere, and I suppose Miguel Vargas is now known. So, you know,
He's
Jonathan
being
India is
drafted in
known
a lot
also.
of. He's just so you know, he's being drafted in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, well, who
Sure.
would you say is
And-
more likely to be a sleeper, Vaughn Grissom or Miguel Vargas? Who's getting
Vargas,
slept on
of
more?
course. I mean, Vargas hasn't played. If he's played in the major leagues, it's been very minimal.
Yeah,
That's
because
obviously-
the Dodgers didn't give him a chance. Vaughn Grissom is going to be the starting. I mean, well, okay. Atlanta is saying we're not sure if he's
Yeah.
going to be the starting shortstop. Maybe Orlando Arcia is going to be, but like he's going to be the starting shortstop. That's why they didn't re-sign Dansby Swanson. You don't not re-sign Swanson because you have Orlando Arcia waiting to take his place. They like this Grissom kid. He's hit 300 every year.
Every
He's
year.
15 to 20 home runs, 15 to 20 steals pretty consistently. That's obviously value. And if Atlanta keeps saying we might start him in AAA, his value as a value pick only goes up if you can get him. I have Vargas also as a
Guys
value
like
pick.
Vargas.
You know who I snuck in there as a value pick because I'm a Yankee guy. I'm sorry, but he still qualifies at second is DJ LeMahieu. People forget how good of a hitter and how good of an offensive player he was until he got hurt last year. Speed isn't part of his game. So the fact that he's 34 instead of 31 anymore or 35, as long as the bat speed is there, this guy is a gap to gap hitter who can in Yankee Stadium can hit 20 home runs, and he's in the middle of a potent lineup. So I have him in there as well. And somebody who hasn't been mentioned, another rookie, and for those of you watching, this is a very important thing to know if you're going to be a good fantasy baseball player. Know your own weaknesses, okay? What your weaknesses are as an owner. One of mine is falling in love with young players, with unproven players. And so I have to work really hard not to overdraft rookies or top prospects. But this guy is one I'm hoping nobody's paying attention to, but that's Edouard Julien in Minnesota. They got rid of Arias. He's now in Miami, so they don't have a second baseman. Polanco, they might put at second some, but this kid in 2021, while he was in single A and like high A and whatever, 267, 18 home runs, 34 stolen bases. Last year, between high A and double A, 317 home runs, 19 stolen bases, went to the Arizona Fall League and 96 plate appearances. So not a small amount of plate appearances, batted 400 with 5 home runs and 6 stolen bases.
Is 400 good?
400. That's not bad. That's
That was pretty good.
Barry Bonds on base percentage. No, it was 500.
But see, these are the kind of players that you are certainly going to want to look at in the back end of your roster.
Right.
So
that's somebody I'm hoping to get very late. Or if I draft a couple IL people, I throw him on the IL and I throw them in the IL spot, and then I can pick him up after the draft if he's not drafted.
Okay, now let's quickly talk about busts. I wrote down my busts, and then I looked at him and I was like, does this even qualify as a bust? He was so bad last year that I can't even. But he has name recognition. So it's Ketel Marte. Ketel Marte.
God, he was like 3 years ago, guys. Remember how good he was? He was stealing bases,
just for 1 year.
He was hitting home runs. He had a great year. Now I agree with you. He
10th.
fell off. He fell
at second base just because of the
10th.
potential. Just because, but I agree with you. But my busts are actually the ones we talked about at the top of the show. Ozzie Albies and Jazz Chisholm, right? Because you have to use such draft capital to get these guys that if Chisholm gets hurt, he missed 100 games last year. 100, right? Like, you can't use a third or fourth or fifth round pick on a guy who's going to play 60 games unless it's a pitcher.
Yeah, I think the chances of them playing 60 games is not actually as high as it may seem.
Right.
I mean, there's really two kinds of busts, generally speaking. There's ones that you invest major draft capital and they don't deliver, like the ones you're talking about. And then there's guys like Ketel Marte, who you're sitting in the draft and you're like, oh, I got a steal here. And really, you just wasted your 12th round pick. Because
you kind of did. You'll drop him by All-Star.
I think he's going to be floating on the waiver wire
he'll be floating all year.
He's going to be
Casey will keep him.
He's going to be Dan's next Miguel Sano. Remember, like every
Miguel
year
Sano.
in our draft preview, it was always, that guy's going to be on the waiver wire by April.
And he strikes out about 200
I thought you were
times a year.
saying that I owned him a lot. I was like, I never owned Miguel Sano. No.
You wanted to. You thought about it. Trust me. I know
he's the new Hunter Dozier.
Hunter Dozier. That's a whole different story.
I love Hunter Dozier.
One other second baseman before we move on.
So I have one more too.
And I think is a value pick. Is another guy who was forgotten because of injury last year, and that's Brandon Lau in Tampa Bay. This guy is an offensive machine. He's not going to bat above 270, but 270 is pretty good. The guy had 39 home runs a couple years ago, and that was only his second year in the league. So it's not like we're talking about Ketel Marte, who had 5 years of mediocrity, one really good year, and then went back to being nothing again. This guy, and then in the shortened season, the 2020 COVID season, he hit 17 home runs in 60 games. So 2 years in a row, he did it. Last year he was hurt, and now nobody's talking about him. So he's another one who you can get maybe in the later rounds of the draft. And if you can get 35 home runs at second base that late in the draft, that's huge advantage over your competitors.
Especially if the batting average isn't that bad. Ross, who do you got? You said you wanted one more.
I mean, somebody that the Dodgers were so high on, and he had a pretty good season. It wasn't a bad season at all, is Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux plays outfield also. I get that. He'll probably be the starting outfielder. I don't know if he'll play second. It'll probably be Max Muncy, who needs to bounce back. I mean, he probably won't
talk about bust.
Batting 196.
Talking about bust, but again, he's another guy that can hit 35 home runs. You never know. I have no idea. So Gavin Lux, I like Gavin Lux. If I can get him late in a draft, I'll take him, and I would put him probably on my bench, but it doesn't matter. I think he could probably have a pretty good year. The Dodgers are so high on this kid, and I think this could be his year.
Okay, and if you want to take Max Muncy, you're essentially just putting it out there. You're essentially starting Mike Zunino at second base.
Mike Zunino, that's a great name.
195
with Steve Balboni. Let's go way back.
Balboni, going way back.
All right, Steve Balboni.
Let's move to third base, a position Steve Balboni could probably not play.
Never.
Let's talk about top tier. How many? I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm like, is this tier? Are there 3 of them? Are there 5 of them? Are there 7 of them? I mean, it's actually questionable.
I have 6.
You have 6.
Wow.
In the top
Casey, name them off. Go.
Jose Ramirez is number 1. I don't think there's any.
Cleveland Guardian. Yep.
Rafael Devers is number 2. I don't think there's much debate there.
Stud. Yep.
The next 4 can go in any order you want. I go with Manny Machado because he still produces every time.
And he's not coming back to the Padres next year. Keep going.
Yeah, that doesn't matter as long as he's playing third base, right? He's going
only this year matters.
Look, San Diego Padres, Petco Park is the worst stadium in baseball for right-handed power.
Yep.
If he's leaving there, that's only good for his fantasy value. So
It's just weird. I mean, why would you announce you're leaving a team like before the season starts? I wanted to ask you that. I mean, I was like,
he didn't say he's leaving. He said he's exploring free agency. He's opting
right, but
out
he
because
doesn't
the
want to come
market
back
has
to the
changed.
Padres.
I agree with Ross though. It's a weird move. Like it just.
Well, do you remember when Alex Rodriguez, like in the middle of the Red Sox Rockies World Series, announced like he was being traded? Like he announced it himself that he was traded to the Yankees or whatever it was. It was like some people just need to get the spotlight on him when there's no reason for it to be. So
okay, Rafael Devers is 3. Who's 4?
2 is Devers, 3 is Machado, 4, and this is one Ross disagrees with. I have Bobby Witt. I just think
I don't disagree at all.
as a rookie, 20 home runs, 30 stolen bases, maybe he bats 240, 250, but to get 30 steals at third base. So I have him 4. I have Arenado,
by the way.
Right. I have Arenado 5 because he's Mr. Consistent. And then Austin Riley 6. And I think they're all that first tier because Austin Riley, like, look, 2 years in a row, he's proven that he's not a fluke, right? 35 plus home runs, a 280 plus batting average, RBIs, runs scored, a good hitter's park,
30 plus and 100 RBI guy.
And so I have those 6 that I would be more than happy with as one of the cornerstones of my offense.
Okay, and I agree with you on the top 6, but I just think Jose Ramirez is in a tier all by himself. He's
and that's fair. Yeah. But
otherwise, I agree. I have Bobby Witt Jr. 4th also. I have Arenado 5th. Was that where you had him?
Yeah.
And then Austin Riley?
Yeah.
Okay, so we almost have the same order, but I actually put Manny Machado ahead of Rafael Devers. He did outperform him last year. He also steals more bases.
Yeah, I just think Devers is on the way up still. Like, I just think he's gotten better every year. I don't think he's peaked. And I'm excited to see what that. I shouldn't say that. I'm not excited because he's a Red Sox. But I
As
think
a Yankees
for
fan,
fantasy purposes, I think it's insane what he's capable of.
Okay, Ross, we've mentioned our top 6. Do you have the same top 6? Is there any difference?
I have the same top 6. I think Alex Bregman could have a big season for Houston.
I have him 7. And
he was hurt last year. I like this rookie, Gunnar Henderson. I know he's a rookie. I'm not high on rookies, but I think Gunnar is the class of the rookie class this year. Him and Carroll are the 2 top rookies coming out. So I like Gunnar, especially in Baltimore, whose team improved 1,000%.
Oh my gosh!
And another guy that's always consistent, but his batting average kills you. This guy's batting average will kill you, but home runs and RBIs, he's just a stud. And runs scored is Eugenio Suarez of the Seattle Mariners. Suarez is just, if you look at his numbers and RBIs the past 5 years, he has to be like
he's so consistent,
top 3.
And look, Ross, last year he batted 236, and it used to be that was a terrible batting average.
Yeah.
Now it's not that bad.
But he had a horrible, if you remember, he was below 200.
And when he started off, Suarez almost always starts off badly.
But he was like, guys, he was hitting like 120.
He does it all the time.
He reminds me of Edwin Encarnacion, right? If you remember Encarnacion, April or the beginning of
I forgot that about
May, he always batted like 200 at best. And then starting June 1st, he was like a 295 hitter for the next 4 months. Always.
Right. And but he was like unplayable.
Right. And what, and I don't know if you and I have had this discussion many years ago. What we used to do is intentionally not draft him.
Right.
And then in April, after he's been atrocious for 4 weeks, do such a low ball offer just to get him and then enjoy him the rest of the year. And it worked.
That's a great
almost
strategy
every time.
And Suarez is totally in that camp.
Suarez is a similar player. So is Matt Chapman.
He's a guy, again, sleeper pick, value pick, you name it. He's that pick at third base. I mean, Matt Chapman, you can put in the same category, I guess.
Right. I have him right there with him.
I mean, I think those 2 are like interchangeable. If you look at their numbers, it's pretty close. And he's in Toronto,
which is another great.
And what's going to happen with Justin Turner in Boston? What do you guys think Justin Turner would do this year?
I think he's going to be very good there. I mean, look,
what position is he going to play?
They have him at third base.
Well, I mean, in
where's
fantasy,
Devers going to play?
That's a great question.
Oh, I don't even know where he's going to play. I just know that they signed him to not play, and he's got third base eligibility in Yahoo. That's all I care about this year.
Yeah.
You're not looking to keep a guy like that, but I think he's
sit
going to be
right
very
next
good.
to Trevor Story.
But he's still, even Justin Turner, even when he is good, he's going to be maybe the 10th best third baseman. I mean, he's a good back end guy. Here's a guy that I really like that no one's mentioned so far.
Who?
Anthony Rendon.
If he's healthy.
Okay,
I mean, it's
but
just like, Dan, the past 2 years, I mean, the Angels signed him and he played like 10 games.
I understand, but the price tag is so low.
That's a value pick.
That's a value pick. That's a value pick.
I do see him as a value pick, but I actually think he's got so much more upside. He's got so much more upside than a lot of these other guys. Let me ask you this. Who has more upside right now?
Yeah,
Anthony Rendon or Alec Baum?
Alec Baum.
Why?
Rendon. I'd rather have Rendon.
All right, let me hear the two arguments. Go ahead, Case.
Well, I mean, I would prefer Baum because I know he's healthy, right? And I know he's been healthy, and
you're addicted to health.
I heard once that availability is the most important ability an athlete
can
have.
That? It was a football coach, wasn't it?
That was Winston Churchill.
Newt Rockne. I don't know. No, I don't know where I heard it, but that stuck with me. And so, yeah, Alec Boehm is capped at 285, 25 home runs, 80 runs scored, 80 RBIs. That might be his peak, right? And that is not going to win you a league. But and Rendon's peak is 340 with 35 home runs and 115 RBIs. But he's only done that once, right? And he hasn't been healthy since.
No, I mean, it's like, and you would still want to keep drafting this guy?
He had back issues when he was in Washington, so it's not like it was a new phenomenon.
It's true, but he's ranked 216 in Yahoo. You can get him at the back end, and he's got elite upside.
Yeah, and hopefully he starts on the IL, so you can put him in your IL spot and pick up somebody who'll play for you.
And the chances are very good that it will be that way. But now, Case, I just have to say, the person who said that quote, you as a New York fan, interesting you didn't know this, Bill Parcells.
There you go. I like
New York Giants head coach.
That works.
The only thing to fear is fear itself.
If you want me to cook the meal, I should have a chance to pick the ingredients or whatever.
Ross is now merging Bill Parcells with Winston Churchill.
Somebody we haven't mentioned is Ty France. I mean, we talked
He's
about him last week. We talked about him last week.
Look at his stats from last year. I mean, look what he did, and no one talks about it.
Okay, but one caveat about Ty France. I agree with you, and I have him as my value pick, but the vast majority of the statistics came in the first 2 months. He was a monster. Do you guys remember that?
Yes. Yeah. We were talking about him as like he could be a top 15 fantasy player.
I mean, when he was playing like that, you couldn't even trade for him in a keeper league because it looked like he was going to be an elite player. Now, I still think he could. He's got more ceiling he can get to. But
I'm a huge soccer fan, as many of you know.
Yeah, we know.
And so I watch the Premier League and the European leagues all the time. And there's a quote by a midfielder. His I don't know what his full name is. He's Brazilian, and a lot of the Brazilian players just have
Bill Parcells.
Singular names. And he's Fred, literally F-R-E-D, Fred. And he's not a flashy player. He's not the highest paid player. And somebody asked him like a question, kind of like, well, what do you see as your role on the team? And his answer was like, look, every team needs people who can carry the piano so the artists can play. I'm a piano mover. Like, my job is not to be flashy. It's not to win the game for you. I'm to set it up so that the artists can impress everybody. The superstars, the Messis, the Ronaldos, whatever it might be. Ty France to me is a piano mover. He's not elite in any one category, right? He's not going to win you the league. He's never going to hit more than 20 home runs. He's not going to steal a lot of bases.
He's not going to lose you the league.
But he's not going to cost you in any one category either, right? He's going to be that solid guy so that if you have 5 power hitters who don't have great batting averages, he's going to help compensate for that, right?
Let me just make one added point. You said he's not going to cost you in any category, and this shows you the state of stolen bases. He stole 0 bases, and yet Casey's still right. It's not going to hurt you. Because there are plenty of guys who don't steal any bases. It's just not going to hurt you that much. And Ty France is a great back end guy. You have to plan your draft that way. You got to see, where is it worth spending at the top? Where is it worth waiting? And a guy like Ty France could slide into your third base spot very well. And meanwhile, he's got first base eligibility too. That can be very helpful. when you have guys who have position eligibility at 2 different positions or 3 or 4,
3 or 4,
grab them. It's more than a tiebreaker.
Who was that guy last year who had 5 position?
It was the Houston Astros guy.
It's like 5 catcher.
I'm blanking
first
on
base,
his
second
name.
base. It was like
He was the shortstop. Let me figure it out.
I don't know. I remember last year was a guy who had like 5.
He just qualified at every single position, but not
it was
catcher.
like you might as well pick him up.
When I was first playing fantasy baseball, so this is going back 25 years, almost 30 years now.
Was Babe Ruth still playing or no?
He was. There was a player for the then Florida Marlins.
Yep.
Jerry Brown, we called him the governor.
Yep, with an E at the end, correct?
And he qualified at 7 positions.
7 positions
because they did right field, center field.
Okay, they did the separate outfields.
We broke the outfield positions down. The only one he didn't qualify were pitcher and left field.
Well, in Ross's MFSN league, it's broken down that way, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got all kinds of things, and I still haven't had anyone hit for the cycle because it's so rare. But that's one of the categories. Every week you just tie, every single time. All right, let's go to busts. I have one that should be pretty interesting. I'll jump in. I want to hear Ross's take on this because you mentioned this guy before as somebody you like a lot.
Who is it?
I think Brandon Drury is going to fall back. I don't think first of all, he's switching leagues, and that can sometimes really mess with people.
He's been in the American League plenty. He was with the Yankees for a while, I think. Wasn't he with Toronto for a while?
Okay.
He was with the Yankees.
But he never hit well before that.
No, I know. He was always the Wally Pipp, right? Like he was the Yankees starting third baseman when he was with the Yankees like 4 years ago. But it was the year that he got hurt like the second week of the season. And that was the year Miguel Andujar and Gleyber Torres came up at the same time and just smoked the ball. And he never got another chance.
That reminds me, we didn't even mention Gleyber Torres in second base. I had him as my 8.
I have him at 8.
We mentioned Torres because we just talked about the top 5 and other players that we enjoy.
I just want to make sure he gets highlighted because you don't want to miss him in the draft. He's a great value. Okay, so you liked Drury. I just think he's kind of a journeyman. I think he had a career.
He's totally a journeyman. He's a guy that you want to have on your team because he can play any position. He's a very skilled athlete. Yeah. And he the past couple of years, he's been hitting. I mean, he's been hitting the ball very hard. And
so this is runs. Interesting. That just made me think Ross and I have a very different idea of what a journeyman is. Because I was saying journeyman, meaning I think he's waiver wire fodder.
Well, remember the Reds signed him and he was out of baseball. I mean, the Reds signed him on a minor league contract and he had no place to go. And so the Reds gave him league minimum, paid him nothing. And he had a great first half, and the Reds traded him. That's what they do.
What is league minimum these days? I'm curious. What is league minimum these days?
600 case.
I'll look it up.
650, I would say.
Okay, 650,000.
Let's say if I'm guessing.
I don't think it's that high.
Minimum player 570,000 in 2021.
Okay,
right. So what's 2023, Casey?
Let's just put this in perspective. Can you imagine any other field where you say, "Oh, they paid him nothing," and it was
in
over
2022? The collective bargaining agreement. Remember, they just redid the CBA in 2022. It went up to 700,000.
Okay, but think about that. I mean, I know how hard it is to make it to the major league. It's so hard. So I'm not saying it's not deserved in that way, but it is really interesting that we would say, "Oh, he makes league minimum." And by the way, league minimum like 30 years ago, what was it? It was 200,000 maybe.
30 years ago?
A lot lower. And probably even lower than that. It's probably like 150,000.
Well, what do you think the league minimum is in the NBA?
800,000?
If you have 0 years of experience, so league minimum, if they signed me tomorrow, is 1.017 million.
Wow.
Oh my God. League minimum is over $1 million.
League minimum, if you have 1 year of experience, jumps up to 1.637. 2 years, 1.8, all the way up. It keeps going up until if you're 10 years in, league minimum is 2.9 million.
Wow.
But that's what happens when you have the same money contract, like TV deals, but only 12 players on a roster to have to pay.
Right.
You can pay a lot more.
Yep. Okay. So I had Brandon Drury, the journeyman, good or bad, whatever you say about that. Ross, Case, who are your bust picks?
I have Bobby Witt. As much as I love him and as much as he's one of my favorite players, and I think he's super exciting, he's also like a 200 strikeout a year guy. And so the chance of investing in him and the amount you have to
Busting.
invest.
Kasey, I think he's going to be a 30-30 guy this year. I really do.
No, and he very well could be.
I mean,
but he could also be.
I think Kasey thinks he will be also, but he just knows there's risk.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's risk, of course, but
I'm
I
not
think
predicting him to be a bust.
I mean,
See, and I think
my
I
bust
take
is.
busts that differently than you guys. I'm saying who is the most volatile player you're going to have to.
I mean,
pay a
it's
lot?
obviously the rookie Gunnar Henderson. I mean, they're putting all this pressure on this kid. He's going to be starting third base in Baltimore. I don't know if you guys remember Brooks Robinson, but he has some big shoes to fill with Brooks Robinson playing that
Cal
position.
Cal Ripken finished his career at third. So
okay, I'm kidding.
So
Gunnar he's getting all this hype. He's on the cover of magazines. People are talking about him. He's on all these sports shows. So he has all this pressure on him. And we talked about this. Rookies never do that great their first year out. And it's a proven fact. Aaron Judge, Mike Trout, you name it. I can tell you.
Aaron Judge
had
won Rookie of the Year and finished second of the year in MVP
but
voting.
Look what he did the year.
Altuve.
But he was qualified for Rookie of the Year. But the year before, when he first came
he had
up,
60 at bats.
So what?
But that's
I
not
do
a
think-
rookie year.
I do think there's a difference when somebody only comes in for about 60 at bats.
I'm saying this kid, again, he's starting. It's a very hard thing for him to do.
runs.
I don't think he's going to be a huge bust. I'm not saying he's going to be like demoted to the minors.
Where did you have him ranked, Ross?
I had him ninth.
I have
him
eight.
ninth also.
I had him ninth. I mean, I just with all the hype and everybody talking how great he is, I just don't think he'll fill those shoes the first year. But if you're in your keeper league or if you're in a dynasty league, yes, draft him. Yes. But if it's a redraft league, think about it. I mean, there's some other players that I'd rather have than him.
Okay,
year.
so who have we left out that
I mean, how about the kid from Pittsburgh, Hayes? All this,
Ryan Hayes?
yeah, all this hype. People talked about him when he was in the minors, how great he was. He got hurt himself bad.
He still
Came
had
back.
over 500 at bats.
Came back. I mean,
7 home runs or something.
Yeah, but he had so much.
The 7 home runs, that's bad enough. What's astounding is he had over 500 at bats and he had 41 RBIs.
Yeah.
And 55 runs scored. And that's just Pittsburgh.
This kid had so much hype, and he was a first round pick. I mean, people talked about him, and he was people saying he's going to be a 30-30 guy, 40-40. I mean, power, stealing bases, and he never came up with anything. But maybe this is his year. I don't know. So I'm asking you.
My value picks. We mentioned Alec Bohm. I still think I actually see him as a value
Alec
pick.
Bohm.
He's similar to Ty France in that respect. He's not going to do anything flashy, but as long as he's, in Philadelphia,
if he starts figuring out power, though, he's going to be a monster.
Monster.
But what about Josh Jung for Texas? Like this guy, if he didn't tear his rotator cuff or his shoulder or whatever he did at the start of last year, this guy has prodigious power. He's going to be a strikeout guy, but he's not going to be Joey Gallo, for crying out loud, ideally for him, I guess. And then, as I said, with my disclaimer last time, I'm a sucker for rookies. I'm a sucker for prospects. So Jordan Walker is one of the guys I want to get at the end of almost every draft. They don't have a spot for him in St. Louis right now.
They don't. I don't know if he'll make the team, Kasey.
Because Nolan Arenado is a pretty good third baseman. I don't think they're going to bench.
But later in the year, they're going to find a spot.
Or they'll find a spot in right field, or
he's playing in the outfield. They're
right.
planning
And
to
this guy
play
is a 30-30 toolsy specimen.
I'll tell you this: if he makes the ball club, yes. If he doesn't, he'll probably spend the whole year in the minors till September. They probably, unless he gets hurt.
I think he'll come up by mid-year. I think he's one of the few rookies, if he doesn't make it, that's still worth a back-end roster spot.
Okay,
depends on your league.
No, I think the kid's a guy that's got a great future ahead of him. I just don't know if he'll get it
last year. What did he bat? 306, 19 home runs, 22 stolen bases in 119 games. Then in the Arizona Fall League, 290 with 5 home runs and 3 stolen bases.
Yeah,
that's
I was going to bring him up too. I mean, he has great potential. It's just with him, it's just playing time.
So I want to mention two guys, totally different ends of the spectrum. We talked a little bit about Alex Bregman. He's the one guy who we all put outside of the top 6, who has upside to get into that top 6. So
he has to start running again. That's for sure.
Well, he does, but even hitting the way he did, if he just ups the power a little bit, he gets
Yeah.
into some
Oh,
serious
he's
value.
talented. And he's
And
Jewish,
now
so we have a
I
soft
just have to
spot
note
for him.
this. I cannot believe we made it through an entire third base segment without you talking about Jose Miranda. Was that because you talked about him at first base?
At first base, yeah.
There we go. That I was like, what's happening here? Kasey has been in love with Jose Miranda for at least 2 seasons.
And I like
think.
his uncle too, or cousin, whoever, Lin-Manuel
That's right.
Miranda, but
That's
not
right.
for baseball purposes.
No, he's pretty good on Broadway and movies. All right, guys. I think we did second base and third base. We're ready to go for shortstop next week. Shortstop has become this position. Do you remember when it used to be thin?
And then it became like
because all the top players just end up there.
right. Well, it was very thin, and then it went to like where it was A-Rod and Jeter and Nomar and Miguel Tejada, and like all of a sudden there were
huge
like
amounts, right.
6 or 7 super elite guys, and then it thinned out again a little bit, and now it's
back to pretty robust. Okay, guys, we'll talk about shortstops next week. Guys, those of you who are watching, keep the comments coming. Whether you're here with us live or you're watching later, we want to hear what you think about this. Did we get these rankings right? Should we be changing something? Are we missing something in the strategy that you see? Let us know. It's been great being with you guys. Thank you, Kasey. Thank you, Ross the Boss. We'll be back here Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.